Hi everyone, it's me, Arden Lee, and this is the third video in this series, Deal with the Devil. So, quick recap of what's happened in this series so far. In the first video, I talked about how immediately after I relaunched this channel in the spring with the intention of showing my journey of both music and magic and how those things play out together in my life, I started receiving all of these unmistakable signs and synchronicities that I was being guided to make the proverbial crossroads deal with the devil for success in music. In my case, for a record deal for my band, my solo project, Arden and the Wolves. And after a chat in the second video with Witch for Hire Sarah Mastros, I learned that the deity that was sending me these signs was Hermes, Greek god of communication, and as it turns out, also a devil of the crossroads. And after that video, I thought, okay, I feel confident about what I'm gonna offer Hermes, and I feel pretty confident about how I'm gonna do the ritual, so I guess I'll just go do it. And then I realized I actually don't know what makes for a good record deal for me. I don't know what I should be asking for, and that felt pretty important, obviously. Luckily, I have a lot more experienced folks in the music industry around me who I can go to ask for help and advice. And in this case, I went to Daniel Graves, who is the lead singer and sole proprietor of the industrial pop band Aesthetic Perfection. And I asked if he would be cool with me interviewing him for this channel so I can ask his opinion about what makes for a good record deal for an artist like me. Daniel is really knowledgeable and really outspoken about his knowledge of the music industry, and he's been so generous sharing his resources with artists who are maybe not as experienced as he is, because he really wants to be able to support everyone in the community, and I really appreciate that a lot. Now, before I jump into the interview, because I said that I was going to make this channel about the interplay of both music and magic, I want to talk a little bit about the backstory of how I came to meet Daniel online so that I could ask him for his help in the first place. Back in January of this year, I debuted my new music project, Prospertine, which is a dark wave industrial dance pop collaboration with my bandmate Jeremy Bastard, who lives in New York City. And when I did that, two things happened. The first thing was that as soon as I did that, one of my friends saw that I was now making dark wave industrial music and invited me to this Facebook group called Sounds and Shadows, which is this really lovely, tight-knit community of dark wave musicians. And then the second thing that happened is I was like, okay, I guess I'm making dark wave industrial dance pop music now. So if I'm doing that, then I should probably go and start putting together an inspo playlist on Spotify so I can get to know the genre better and decide what kind of sounds I want to create. And as I was putting that Spotify playlist together, one of the suggested songs that came up was a track called Never Enough by Aesthetic Perfection. And I listened to it, and it's one of those songs that you listen to it and just the first time you hear it, you're like, God, this is so dope. It has this really great catchy pop melody paired with this really beautiful dark wave industrial production. And for like weeks, I was listening to it on repeat in the car, just being like, this is so dope. This is exactly the kind of thing that I want to create. Meanwhile, unrelatedly, or so I thought at the time, I was writing some new moon intentions in my new moon journal. And on the Pisces new moon of March 13th, 2021, I wrote a bunch of intentions about my music. And one that I wrote was, I attract and meet the right music industry professionals who want to support my work. And then literally the very next morning, I wake up, and when I reach for my phone, the first thing I do is I sign on to Facebook, and the first thing I see in my feed is a post in the Sounds and Shadows group saying, hi guys, my name's Daniel, I'm a new member of the group here, and I have a band called Aesthetic Perfection. So all I'm saying is that when I see a little cluster of events like that together, I try and pay attention, because if history is any indicator, usually it means that there's something there for me to learn. And sure enough, Daniel is really kind and really outspoken about his support of newer artists, and really generous with his knowledge of the music industry. I've already learned a ton just following his posts about his own experience. So I was really grateful that he said yes to chatting with me, and I'm so excited to share some of the interview that we did together. So without any further delay, let's get to it.
I think really when I'm sort of railing against record labels, when I'm speaking online, I'm speaking more to this cultural narrative that we have that an artist cannot survive without having a record contract, right? So it's like we all kind of grew up with the sort of dream, or at least, musicians grew up with this dream of like meeting some cigar chomping executive who's like, kid, you're going to be the next big thing. And you're just like, yeah. And then, you go out on the road and you're, making millions and millions of dollars and your videos on MTV 24/7. And, that was actually never the reality, even back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever. But it's even less so the reality today. And so I think if I'm sort of trying to do anything, it's encourage artists to be their own benefactor, right? It's like knowing that you can do this without the gatekeepers. However, there's always a but, right? And the but is, what is it that you're actually looking for? Because, or what is, maybe a better way of looking at it is, what is success to you? What are your personal goals? Because if your personal goals are to be on the radio, you are very, very, it's very unlikely that you're going to achieve that without a record label, without one of the, the big three, Sony, Warner, or whatever. If your goal is just to be a self-sufficient indie artist and you have no sort of aspirations for, radio play and headlining the forum, right? It's like, then you really can do this without anybody whatsoever. However, if that is sort of like your ultimate goal and that is the path you want to go down, well, then you need to sort of like play the game, because you can't win unless you play the game. Right. And I always felt like I've been quite transparent about this fact. It's like, for all of, my railing against record labels and all this kind of stuff, like, I would absolutely sign with one of the big three. No doubt about it. And I would probably take a deal that was not, let's say, like, optimal for me, because you always have to make concessions in order to, it's, you gotta take the risk to win.
Yeah.
And I think that if that is your sort of long-term aspiration, you need to ask yourself, what is it that you're willing to sacrifice? And unfortunately, there is no, I can't give you like a blanket answer that's like, okay, this deal's good for you, this deal's bad for you, because, you start playing this game and, well, yeah, there are going to be some things that you're not going to like about the record deals that you sign. But you just have to, I would say, go into these agreements knowing what it is you're getting yourself into and being 100% comfortable with it, right?
Well, damn. The more I do magic, the more I learn that there's never any one perfect one-size-fits-all answer for anything, and that it's always on me to figure out what I want and then figure out how to ask for it. And I hate that. The reason I identified as a submissive for so many years was I hate making my own decisions. But I guess if I'm going to be creating my reality, then it's up to me to decide what reality I want to create. And that involves learning to navigate the field that is ahead of me and figuring out how I'm going to do that.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you the deal that I would sign.
Okay.
Because
this is perfect. This is exactly what I'm looking for.
Because I've thought, like, this is the stuff that keeps me up at night. Like, I think about the deals that I would sign. Because I would absolutely go and have a conversation with Sony or Warner or Universal, right? And I try to imagine, like, what would it take for me to sort of give up the fact that I am, at least right now in my career, like, quite stable, right? Like, I have 100% control over everything. So what would it take for me to give that up?
Yeah, you're not coming from a place of scarcity. Your plate is already full, and you're like, what are you going to do for me, basically?
Right. And so here are the things that are like the most important to me. I would actually not take an advance for making a record unless it was like millions of dollars, which is something that I would never be able to sell out of anyway. So it's like you have to think about like, okay, are they going to give me 200 grand, like something that would be great, but is not going to like be life changing? Or are they going to give me like, millions and millions of dollars, which is just going to completely change my whole existence? So for the most part, I would not be interested in taking money up front in order to try to negotiate a better percentage on the back end, because I think that sort of like pays off in dividends. I would try to make a deal where they can't shelve my album. So one thing that I don't know if you or your sort of like viewers are aware of, record labels will often have an album produced and then decide that they don't want to release it. But since they own the album, they don't ever release it. So
That would be a nightmare. Oh my God.
Yeah. So it's like months or years of an artist's work will go to waste, and it never ever sees the light of day. So I would sort of add some kind of, let's say, like a termination clause, in the sense where it's like, look, I'll produce this record for you, but if you don't release it in 6 months or a year, I can release it myself because I self-financed it anyways, right? So it's like, you haven't sunk any money into this. If you decide you don't like my record, or there's another artist that you would rather focus your time, energy, and money on, well, then let me have my record and I'll go release it on my own, and we part ways and we're happy.
Nice. That sounds important to me. Oh my God. If I made something and I couldn't put it out, it would be like not being able to give birth.
For real. This is a thing that record labels do, and it destroys people's like whole careers. They will often buy artists that are similar to artists that they are trying to promote. So let's say like I don't know what label the Bieber is on, but let's say Universal, whatever, has this new Bieber record coming up, but there's this hot new young like boy singer who's threatening to take the wind out of Bieber's sails. What they will often do, they'll sign that artist, and then they will never ever release them. They will just kill their career in order to protect their investment. So they play super dirty, and you got to be prepared for that, and you gotta be willing to play these games. And so
that's so good to know.
It's so shady, but that's life. I think another thing that has become really incredibly popular over the last few years, especially with indie artists, which I think is such a pity, are 360 deals. So that's when the label gets 360 degrees of an artist's income. So, oh, your repatterning project, they get their fingers in the pie. Oh, your merchandise, oh, they get their fingers in that pie. They're able to take a percentage of every single avenue of income that you have, like almost like a manager, even though they're only a record label. But it's because of such poor sort of record sales over the years, the labels make this case for themselves, like, oh, well, we got to make our money back somehow. We got mortgages to pay and mouths to feed. So
won't someone think of the 1%?
Yeah. So it's another thing to really be careful of, is 360 deals. I think they're not as prevalent now because of the sort of like back end deals that they make with like the streaming services, where it's like they will negotiate sort of kickbacks for themselves from, how do I explain this? It's like a label will go to Spotify and they will negotiate with Spotify, and Spotify will say, yo, we'll give you, I don't know, however much money or however many shares of stock for you to, put your artist on our platform. So the label gets money sort of like in a back end sneaky way, but then they just pay like the standard, like sort of 0.0039 royalty for the streams. So the labels are actually making a shit ton of money, but the artists are still sort of getting their peanuts. And and I mean, more power to them, and it has sort of made it less prevalent for 360 deals, but 360 deals are still something you need to be sort of, keep an eye open for. You have got to understand every word that is in your contract and how you can exploit that to your benefit, right? So there's so many things to be wary of, but there's also a lot of room for creativity if you understand your limits and how you can sort of like find the loopholes and make money off of that.
Nice. Cool. And yeah, just in terms of tour support financing, so that's not something that you would want because you're already accustomed to paying for your own tours. And you also, I don't know what your production costs are, but I'm going to assume that they're less than mine because I know that you do most of your own production. So it's more your labor than the cost. Is that correct?
Yes. But since Aesthetic Perfection is for all intents and purposes a solo project, right? It's like, so I am the one who bears the financial responsibility of everything. It's like, I pay my band members, their fee, regardless of whether or not the tour made money. Yeah. And I've done this for many years where it's like, I come home from a tour, everybody gets paid, I'm in the red. I finance all of my own tours. And you have to remember that any sort of money that they pay up front comes out of your record deals at the end. And a lot of people get very, very creative with the accounting in these record labels.
So for me, I really don't want to be in the red because while I really admire Daniel's ability to take big financial risks for his dreams and his success in music, I know for myself, based on my own money trauma in the past, that I have a hard time functioning if I feel like I'm under a lot of financial pressure. So I think for me, I really do want tour support, and I'm not super worried about having to pay that back because as long as it's coming from my music isn't really making me any money right now anyway. So as long as I don't get caught in a 360 deal and I can still support myself with my business, then anything I receive for tour support is basically going to be icing on the cake at this point.
I'd want to be able to, I guess, have a touring budget or have a label that's going to be like, oh, we'll put you on tour with this person and we'll take care of all your musicians. So is that something I could, like, what would I have to look for in the contract to know that I'm going to get like the promotion of my work to broaden my audience and, to be able to go on tour and things like that without, it's like, I'm already paying $30K, like roughly to make this full length album. Like I'm going to be, I do not have another $30K to pay for the tour to promote it.
Yeah. So they will finance your tour. They will pay for the buy-on. They will not book it for you. This is what a booking agent is for. So there's just somebody else that gets their fingers in the pie, right? But that's the thing. It's like, so you've now identified something that is important to you that you would want to see as a line item on your contract.
One thing I really appreciate about Daniel is that, like me with Arden and the Wolves, Daniel is the sole proprietor and assumes full financial responsibility for his band, Aesthetic Perfection. The difference, though, is Daniel has been doing it for many more years than I have and is a lot more successful than I am at this point. So his work provides a really great model of what my career could maybe one day look like if I keep working. However, at this point, I know that I do want tour support and I do want help booking that tour because if I was capable of doing that, I would be doing it already. So that is something that I do think I want out of a record deal.
If nobody is paying tour support for me, if that's coming out of my pocket, then there's much less justification for anybody to come in and be like, hey, I'm paying, because I've had this before. Oh, I'm paying your tour support. You better give me some of that merch money, right? So it's like, they always want to find a way to weasel their way into your revenue stream. So it's like, if you have this wall between them and your finances, then you can easily put a stop to it, as opposed to being like, oh, well, okay, they did give me 30 grand for this tour. I guess I might as well give them my merch money, when it's like, merch money is where you make all your money.
Yeah. So that would be particularly good for me to watch out for, because it sounds like that might not even be something that's in the contract, but they're just trying to emotionally manipulate you into. And I'm like, my main trauma response is fawn response, where I like to make everyone happy. So that's a place for me where I would need to learn to just draw a really firm boundary and be like, oh no, that It was in the contract that you paid for the tour. So
Yeah.
the merch is not in the contract. Yeah.
See, I actually have a similar sort of like mindset where it's like I want to always be accommodating and diplomatic and all that kind of stuff, which has sort of like led to me being taken advantage of in the past, which is why I'm so like adamant about making everything clear cut right now because there is no sort of like wiggle room with the way that I try to sort of like set everything up where it's like, look, no, this is that, and anything that even sort of tries to cross that boundary, then it all already feels like it's edging into some kind of, I don't want to say like misappropriation or whatever. It's just, you just feel like somebody's trying to like, weasel their way in like they do. And you can just politely be like, no, it's not in the contract. It's cool. And then you don't have to feel bad. And then, it's all clean cut. I like it.
Yes.
Like that.
Yeah. It's so funny as I'm speaking to you, I'm like, wow, no wonder I didn't succeed in music at that level, like before this point in my life, because I would not have been able to set any boundaries.
It's hard. It is really, really hard, especially, when you're working with people that sort of like pretend to have your best interests at heart, but when really they're looking out for their bottom line.
So now that I've learned about some of the pitfalls to avoid when looking into a record deal, I have to think about what is it that I actually do want? How is a record deal actually helping me in some way? And I think it's interesting that I've had this conversation in particular with someone who is really thriving in his career without a record deal, because I kind of have to ask myself at some point, well, I think I want a record deal, but do I just think I want a record deal because of that myth that Daniel was talking about? Or is there actually something that a record deal is going to do for me?
Okay, so in terms of marketing, and specifically in terms of digital marketing, what should I be looking for in the contract to make sure that they're going to really push me on Spotify and other platforms like that?
If Sony gives me a record contract that talks about like marketing strategies and stuff like that, I'm not going to trust myself to understand what it says. I'm going to go to my buddies who understand digital marketing. I've got friends who work in PR and all that kind of stuff. And I would be like, yo, is this like legit? Is the, are the budgets that they've laid out fair? Are the kind of like approaches that they've laid out, are they not only reasonable, but are they, let's say, attuned for the market as it is right now? Because often big labels tend to be sort of like slow moving dinosaurs. They don't really understand the current trends, the way things, kind of work, because it just changes so rapidly. So I think what you want to do is, in every respect, if possible, like talk to people who are more educated than you, to get their sort of, take on it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, exactly. That's part of why I asked you as well. Well, this was awesome. Thank you so much. This was
my pleasure.
Really terrific. I'm sure you hear this all the time, but like I dig your music so much, and I dig who you are as an artist. Thank you just for showing up for yourself and for your art and for your audience in the way that you do, because it's really inspiring to me as well.
Thank you very, very, very much. It's always humbling to hear that. It's nice to know that what I do is heard, seen, and appreciated. It's all I really wanted.
Well, have a wonderful rest of your night, and thank you again.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Take care. You too.
So after that awesome chat with Daniel, I went off to do a little research about how I could tell that a record deal was going to be in my favor in terms of giving me the kind of marketing and promotion and tour financing budgets that I'm going to need for the kind of moves that I want to make in my career going forward. And one of my mentors helped me out by directing me to a study that was released sometime in the last decade from the IFPI, that is the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry. And they talked about exactly what kind of a budget would be necessary these days to really break an artist into the industry. And apparently it's total somewhere between $500,000 and $2 million, which definitely sounds like a lot of money. And the way that breaks down, according to the study, is roughly anywhere from $50K to $350K as an advance for the artist, anywhere from $150K to $500K for recording, between 50K and 300K for music video budget, anywhere from 50K to 150K for tour support, and finally between 200K and 700K for marketing and promotion. Now, I don't really need an advance for the record because I'm already in the process of funding it and creating it myself. While it would be nice, I do have my business, the Repatterning Project, to help me support myself as I'm going for this. So I'm not especially worried about getting money up front. And same thing with a recording budget. Again, I am already financing the creation of this album. Now, it would be nice if that contract had a budget for a subsequent album, because I'd like to be able to create the next album that I do under the auspices of a label and not have to fund it all myself. So that might be something to look for. For music videos, I definitely want a nice healthy budget for that. But I don't need something that is quite so extreme, because especially since I live in LA and I'm connected with a lot of really talented artists, I feel pretty confident that I'm going to be able to make some quality videos even without spending a ton of money. So while I do want a music video budget, I can skimp a little there if necessary. Tour support. Now, this is something I definitely want a budget for in the contract, because I have actually not yet been on tour as a musician, because again, since I'm the sole proprietor of my band Arden and the Wolves and I pay everyone I work with, I haven't yet been able to afford to make music and also tour that music at the same time. And finally, marketing and promotion. I was maybe kind of surprised that of all the items that were listed in this study, marketing and promotion was by far the biggest one, with a budget of anywhere from 200 to 700K. So I am for sure going to look for a record contract that has a really healthy and abundant marketing budget, because my biggest priority at this point is getting my music heard, widening my audience, and expanding my platform. And worst case scenario, even if I don't make that advance back and I don't end up getting a whole ton of streaming royalties, that's still going to help me, because any promotion of my music is also going to promote me as a business, which is going to help me thrive. But I think one last thing to keep in mind is that even as I'm thinking about the items that I would ideally want in a record contract, it's also good for me to keep in mind that this is magic that we're dealing with here. And magic works through a lot of mysterious pipelines. So I don't necessarily need something like a huge marketing budget in order to expand my platform. There's such a thing as going viral. There are so many ways that an artist can suddenly rise to success that actually don't have anything to do with what's in the contract itself. Even so, I want to set myself up for the best chance of success. I think in order to balance those things, I'm definitely going to look for the contracts that have the most abundant marketing and promotional budgets. But at the same time, when I make my deal with Hermes, I think I'm just going to ask for the deal that supports and expands my platform the most. And hopefully that will be clear. So here is what I've decided that I am going to put into my proposal that I am going to take to the Crossroads and offer to Hermes. First of all, I am going to tithe 4% of my net earnings in music. I saw that 4 is the number that is sacred to Hermes, so I'm going to tithe that 4% to the charity Educate Through Music, which I think he's going to be in favor of. I'm also going to throw in that I'm going to write a song that is in praise of him that hopefully he'll really like, that will come out on the record or as a single after the record that I'm currently trying to negotiate a deal for. And as a bonus, I'm going to put in a clause that if I happen at any point in my career to win a Grammy, I am going to get the Hermes wings tattooed on my ankles. That might not be a really big deal for anyone else, but I don't have any tattoos. And between that and tattoos being almost sort of a little like a blood sacrifice, like if I'm getting tattooed, I'm going to be bleeding, I think it's kind of maybe a good bonus offering. In return, I am going to ask for a record deal for the record that I'm working on right now, the Arden and the Wolves album titled Oh Polarity. And I'm going to ask for that record deal to come to me sometime within a year after I have finished the album. I'm going to ask that that contract have a very healthy tour support budget and a very abundant marketing and promotional budget. And I'm going to ask that it be the contract that best supports my highest good and my growth as an artist. And as per Daniel's recommendations, I'm going to make sure that that contract is not a 360 deal so that my other streams of revenue outside of music aren't touched. and that contract includes a termination clause, because the last thing I would want is to spend $30,000 on this album and then sell it to a label but have them never put it out. So we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. And since the factors of my success are not merely determined by what's written in the contract, I'm also going to ask for spiritual support in terms of me aligning with my highest good and my best creative growth as a musical artist. So now I feel pretty clear on what I'm gonna do. And now that I know what I'm looking for in a record deal, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna write up that contract, and I'm gonna go to the Crossroads for real this time. And yeah, in the meantime, I'm going to continue to do lots of work on this album, and I'll keep everyone posted on how it all goes. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.